The Cowboys are standing at a crossroads as we head into the free agency period. And this is one of those years where the list looks long on paper. But the real question is how many of these players actually fit into the future plan. It is not just about who is leaving or who might be staying, but how the front office decides to shape the roster for the next several years. The decisions they make now could define the identity of this team, and the way they handle the free agent class will speak volumes about their long-term vision. The most obvious name at the center of all this is George Pickkins. He is easily the biggest free agent on the Cowboys roster, and arguably one of the most important players in the entire league. If the Cowboys are going to keep their offense elite, they need to figure out a way to keep him in Dallas. Personally, I would not be surprised if he ends up getting franchise tagged, and honestly, I would be stunned if he is not. The Cowboys have shown a pattern of dragging these negotiations out, and that is not ideal for a player of Pickens' caliber. They tend to wait until the deadline, let everything play out, and then make a decision at the last possible moment. That kind of approach creates uncertainty, not just for the player, but for the entire team. Now, I am not saying they will not get a deal done, because I think they will, but I also think it will probably go down to the wire, maybe even past the draft. And we may not see a final answer until closer to the franchise tag extension deadline in June. If Pickens signs an extension before then, that is great. If he ends up playing on the tag, that is something I would rather avoid. Playing on the tag can be a short-term solution, but it ties up cap space and does not give the team the long-term security they need. Still, the Cowboys have a history of making these deals late, and I fully expect them to keep that trend alive. So the question is simple: will they get it done or not? I want to hear what you think, because this is going to be one of the biggest storylines of the offseason. Shifting away from Pickens, the running back situation is another area where the Cowboys have to make some serious decisions. Miles Sanders is a free agent, and he had a solid season, but he never really looked like the game-changing back the Cowboys hoped he would be. He had one big run before he got hurt, and after that, his impact was limited. With the emergence of Malik Davis and Jaden Blue, the Cowboys might feel like they can replace him without missing a beat. The numbers simply do not make sense for Sanders to return, especially if the Cowboys can keep building depth at the position with cheaper options. The running back market is always unpredictable, and sometimes it is more about fit than talent, but from a financial standpoint, it seems like the Cowboys might be better off moving on. That said, I would not be shocked if he signs elsewhere, because the market has a way of surprising you now. Javonte Williams is a different story. I actually hope the Cowboys bring him back, because he was better than expected in every way this season. The only real issue was his pass-catching ability, which was not great, but as a runner, he had his best season ever, and that is something you cannot ignore. There are some decent running backs in free agency this year, which could help drive down his price. The Cowboys have already talked to his agency, but I doubt we see any real movement until closer to the combine and the start of free agency. If the price is right, I would absolutely be interested in bringing him back. If they can keep him for a reasonable deal, I think he could be a valuable piece. This is one of those decisions that could really impact the offense, and I want to know what you think. Should the Cowboys keep Javonte or let him walk? Defensively, the biggest question is Donovan Wilson. He is going to play somewhere next year. There is no doubt about that. The real question is where. I think he was completely misused last season, and that falls on the coaching staff. He was playing too much deep safety, and that is not where he excels. Wilson is better in the box, closer to the line of scrimmage, and he also struggled to keep up with tight ends in coverage. With all that in mind, I would let him leave. I get that he is a good leader, but right now the Cowboys need talent, not just leadership, and honestly, the linebacker room needs an overhaul. The team needs players who can make plays consistently, not just show flashes. That brings me to Kenneth Murray, who I also hope is gone. He was not good, and the trade for him felt like a bad decision influenced by the coaching staff. He had a couple of good games, but overall, he was just not effective. The Cowboys need players who can make plays consistently, not just show flashes. Jack Sanborn is another player who probably will not be back. There is one defensive coordinator candidate out there who might keep him because of their college connection, but I do not think anyone would be upset if he did not return. The linebacker room needs fresh talent, and Sanborn did not exactly set the world on fire. It is going to be interesting to see what direction the Cowboys take. Will they bring in new faces? Or will they try to make the same group work with a new coaching staff? Personally, I think new blood is needed. The defense has been underperforming for too long, and the roster construction has not helped. Now, I know some of you might be wondering about the edge rushers. Dante Fowler did not do much this year, and it was pretty clear he did not mesh well with the coaching staff. I would not be surprised if he returns on a cheap deal under a new defensive coordinator, but I also would not be surprised if he leaves and goes somewhere else. Sometimes players just do not fit, and it seems like that might be the case here. Sam Williams is another name that has been discussed, but he has not shown anything in the last 3 years. The coaching staff might have liked him, but the production just has not been there. It is hard to justify bringing him back when the team needs players who can make an impact immediately. Peyton Turner is another interesting case. He was a former first-round pick, but he did not play this year due to injury. He was activated late in the season but never actually returned to the field. At this point, I do not see a reason to bring him back. The Cowboys need players who can stay healthy and contribute. If Turner can come back and play, great. But the track record is not encouraging. On the other hand, I do hope Jadeveon Clowney is back. Clowney was one of the few bright spots on the defense this year. He made plays, he brought energy, and he was a difference maker. The question is always the same with him. When does he want to sign? And for how much? Moving back to the offensive side, the biggest question is what happens with the wide receiver room. Jalen Tolbert had a season that did not really pop the way some people expected. He showed flashes, but overall, he never became the consistent playmaker that the Cowboys needed. The real ones know what I am talking about, because you could see the moments where he looked like he had potential, but the consistency just was not there. With the way the receiver market is shaping up, I fully expect him to leave in free agency. He has shown enough to get a chance somewhere else, maybe as a veteran receiver who can compete for a role. The Saints are a team that has done that before, bringing in receivers who need a fresh start. I would not be shocked if Tolbert finds a new home and has a chance to grow in a different system. Now, I want to talk about the offensive line, because this is where the Cowboys have to get serious. Brock Hoffman is a name that I like, and I would be happy to bring him back. He has shown that he can start in the NFL, even if it is at a lower level. Given how bad offensive line play has been across the league, I would bet that some team gives him a chance to start for at least a year, just to see what he can do. That means the Cowboys might have to compete for him, and if they want to keep him, they should. Hoffman has value as a player who can step in and start, and that kind of versatility is important for a team that has struggled to find stability up front. Denai is another offensive lineman who I do not care much about bringing back. He struggled at tackle, and he did not show enough to warrant a return. He is a veteran, sure, and he hung around for a little while, but the Cowboys need to find better options. The offensive line is one of the most important units in the league, and you cannot keep rotating players in and hoping for the best. The Cowboys need to bring in talent that can actually protect the quarterback in open running lanes consistently. That is why I would like to see them explore other options, rather than just re-signing players who were not effective. On the other hand, I would not be opposed to bringing back Rob Jones, the guard who did not play at all this year because of a neck injury. The Cowboys liked him, and he gives them depth at guard. If Brock Hoffman leaves, Jones could slide into that role and provide some stability. He would not be expensive coming off an injury, and I think he could be a useful piece. The Cowboys have to be smart about how they allocate money, and bringing back a player like Jones for a reasonable price makes sense. It gives them flexibility and depth, and that is something they need. Corey Ballentini is another name that popped up, but he was only briefly on the active roster after being called up from the practice squad. The quarterback depth chart is going to look very different next year, and I assume that Ballentini is not coming back. He might have some value as a depth player, but the Cowboys are going to be looking at the bigger picture. C.J. Goodwin is a veteran leader, but age has caught up to him, and I do not know if he is as good as he once was on special teams. If he does come back, it would be on a small deal, but I would not be opposed to moving on. The Cowboys need to keep improving the roster, and sometimes that means letting go of players who have been loyal, but no longer provide the same level of performance. Now, let us shift back to the defensive side, because there are a few names that matter. Dante Fowler, as we mentioned, did not do much this year. He clearly did not get along with the coaching staff. And that is always a red flag if the Cowboys bring in a new defensive coordinator. Fowler might be willing to return on a cheap contract, but I also would not be surprised if he leaves and goes somewhere else, maybe even back to a team he is familiar with. The relationship between a player and the coaching staff matters, and if it is strained, it can impact performance. Fowler's situation is one of those where the Cowboys have to decide if they want to take a chance on a player who could be useful, or move on and find someone who fits the system better. Sam Williams is another player who has been discussed, but the last 3 years have not been kind to him. He has not shown the production needed to justify keeping him, and it is hard to argue otherwise. The defensive staff has been a huge issue, and I acknowledge that. Maybe a change in coaching could unlock something in him, but the production simply has not been there. The Cowboys need players who can make an impact now, not players who might break out in a new system. That is why I think the Cowboys should look for new options on the defensive line, rather than relying on players who have been inconsistent. Now, we need to talk about the restricted free agents and tenders. This is where things get interesting, because the Cowboys have some decisions to make on players who could be worth keeping, but the price has to make sense. One of the biggest names here is Brandon Aubrey, the kicker. He has been one of the best kickers in the NFL, and he is a key part of the Cowboys' special teams. The franchise tag for a kicker is not that different from the right of first refusal, and I would bet the Cowboys try to work out a long-term deal with him. Aubrey is 30 years old, which is not old for a kicker, but it is something to consider. The second-round tender is about $1 million less than the franchise tag, so if the Cowboys do not want to commit right away, they could use that as a strategy. Now, I know this is going to be controversial, but if a team offers a second-round pick for a kicker like Aubrey, and the Cowboys decide not to match, I would take that pick. Aubrey is elite, no doubt about it. But sometimes you have to think about the value. If a team is willing to give up a second-round pick for him, that is a big investment, and I would rather have that pick to build the roster. With that said, I do not expect anyone to actually do it. Most teams are not willing to give up that kind of draft capital for a kicker, even an elite one, so realistically, I think the Cowboys will just pay Aubrey. But I want to hear from you. Would you pay him, or would you let him walk? Before we roll on, subscribe to Cowboys Wire News, drop a like, and turn on the bell. Your support keeps the Dallas Cowboys updates coming. Tell us what you think in the comments. Whispers around the league grew louder after a blunt line attributed to Dak Prescott began circulating among insiders. If he comes back, I'm out of the Cowboys. The statement, still unconfirmed in any official setting, has ignited speculation about tension simmering beneath the surface in Dallas and raised questions about the future of one of the franchise's most recognizable leaders. Sources close to the situation describe a locker room that has been managing more than just on-field expectations. The potential return of a familiar figure, one whose presence has long divided opinion inside the organization, appears to have reopened old wounds. Prescott, known publicly for his measured tone and team-first mentality, is rarely associated with ultimatums, which is why the rumor has carried such weight across the NFL landscape. The Cowboys are no strangers to internal power dynamics. Star players, coaching authority, and front office influence have often intersected in complicated ways. In this context, Prescott's alleged comment is being interpreted less as a threat and more as a line drawn after years of compromise. Some believe the quarterback feels his voice, earned through leadership and performance, must finally be decisive in shaping the roster's direction. Around the league, executives are quietly monitoring the situation. A franchise quarterback expressing even hypothetical openness to leaving instantly reshapes market calculations, cap flexibility, trade assets, and long-term planning all come into play if Dallas is forced to choose between preserving harmony or welcoming back a controversial piece of its past. For now, the Cowboys have offered no clarification, and Prescott has not publicly addressed the quote. That silence only fuels the intrigue. Is this a moment of frustration blown out of proportion, or the first crack in a partnership that once seemed unbreakable? Until clarity emerges, the rumor stands as a reminder that in professional football, stability can vanish with a single sentence, even one spoken behind closed doors. That's a wrap. From Cowboys Wire News, for breaking Cowboys updates, subscribe, drop a like, and turn on the bell. Tell us your take in the comments.